because it is in our story where we truly find that in our DNA, that same DNA that flowed through our ancestors is here today. And that trail of tears, that forced removal, is where we find that resilience so many times.
And so as you think about your journey, about where you have been personally, not only your ancestors, not only your great-grandparents, but where you have been. And we are in the midst of a revitalization right now that is so exciting. The Trail of Tears has some very meaningful stories, but each one of you has stories.
We must amplify our historical perspective and not allow a modern removal. Sovereignty and self-determination are too valuable for future generations. However, this will require not only the strength of our tribal leaders, it will require the strength of our people.
And we know the battles and we know the scars that our ancestors felt because we feel those. And when we peel these layers back, we can find that healing. And our country, our tribes are undergoing a time of healing continuously. But today, we understand that there's so much that is out there for each of us to grasp and to take hold. And it is organizations like this that are going to be paramount to what our youth see tomorrow, so that they can have a future and pass these stories and these things along in the most relevant and the most righteous way each and every day.
We wouldn't be gathering here knowing that we've got a great Cherokee democracy. We wouldn't be here, and I couldn't be here as a chief of a nation, because our nation might not exist. But it does exist. The Cherokee people are still here. We're stronger than ever, and part of our strength is we've got great friends in the National Trail of Tears Association. Thank you all very much for your friendship and your work.
So my name's Ryan Spring. Next month I'll be working for the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma Historic Preservation Department for 12 years. It's been a wild ride since Sue decided to take a gamble on me. I started off as a GIS specialist, so my background was in mapping. And then after a few years of doing that, from 2016 to 2020, I was the director of historic preservation, and then I realized I didn't like dealing with people's personal problems, so I stepped down. And I was an archaeological technician for a couple years, and I've been studying under our archaeologists for a while and learning archaeology and loved it. And then one of our researchers left. She decided to become an associate professor at Northwestern in Chicago. So she went up there, and we're still working with her pretty close, but then I took her job back probably about November or December of last year. Doing the same thing I've always done, which is just doing research, doing talks, doing history articles, just trying to get information that we have in our department to our community. Because if it's great to get all this information, and it's great to have it, but if you're not giving it to the people that need it, then you're doing a disservice to your communities. You know, you have to get that information out to the people in a way that they can understand. Because as you all know, history is complex. It's not cut and dry. You just can't say, well, this happened, and this happened, and this happened. Because there's always all these little hurdles along the way. But all that context inside history is what makes it important, and it helps define the people that come from that history. So, anyway, it's 9 o'clock, I'm done rambling. Set my timer, because I know how I am. It's going to be hard holding this up to my face. Hold on like this. Okie dokie. So, today I wanted to come and talk to you about a subject that I'm not an expert on. So here in 2021, our Choctaw Cultural Center opened down in Durant, Oklahoma. And so our department, the Historic Preservation Department, is housed there in the Cultural Center. But the Cultural Center is just, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I'll go through my presentation and kind of explain that a little bit. But what our role was doing a lot of the background research and the information that went into the text for the panels and all the background research for the planning for the Cultural Center. And so that's what I'll go into and talk about a little bit. I don't want to give away everything because I want you all to come and see this beautiful Cultural Center. But I just want to simply talk about the Cultural Center. I'll go into the Trail of Tears exhibit that we did. And instead of showing you the exhibit, I'm going to talk about all the planning that went into that exhibit. So when you come and see it, you'll have a stronger understanding of all the work that took to get to there. And then I'll talk about what initiatives we have in the future for that exhibit. So, with me today is Claire Young. No, Claire couldn't make it to the conference. She tried and tried and tried. But she had a temporary exhibit to take down and a new exhibit to put up. And, she's so Claire Green Young, Cecilia Claire Green Young. She's got 4 names, but she goes by Claire Young. You can see in her program, but she's a very impressive young woman. She got the tribe's first Choctaw Irish Scholarship, and she did a year abroad in Ireland. Just an amazing individual. She's from McCurtain County, which is one of our traditional counties, one of our oldest counties in the area. But she's an amazing young woman, and she's going to have a very bright future ahead of her. So, very glad to be able to steal her thunder today. No, she's amazing. So, of course, you got to have that one that, you got to start off bragging, right? So the Choctaw Cultural Center has been a labor of love whose creation resulted from many years of hard work and dedication by the Choctaw Nation and its people. A special cultural committee went on a fact-finding tour of over 30 tribal museums and cultural centers across the United States. This fact-finding study helped inform the decisions that ultimately led to the design and the creation of the Choctaw Cultural Center. Surveys from over 2,000 tribal members ensured the Cultural Center represented and aligned to the needs of the Choctaw community. So centered in this photo with the big pair of scissors is Sue Folsom. It's right over here. Those are in fact the scissors she uses at home. Keeps happy in line. No, Sue's had a dream for a cultural center for over 2 decades. And so she's helped the tribe, she's helped guided the tribe in this dream, helped plan, create, and open the Choctaw Cultural Center. And so this cultural center wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't have the positive impact that we have on our community today if it wasn't for Sue. So I really just want to appreciate and acknowledge her. You can clap. It's okay. There you go. So the Choctaw Cultural Center is located on over 100 acres in our reservation in southeastern Oklahoma. It's on natural tall grass prairie that's never been plowed. It's still pristine prairie. So the whole reason that we created the Choctaw Cultural Center is to honor the generations of Choctaw people and the stories that they've had. And so that's the name that we have for the Cultural Center is Chata-Noa-Aya, or the Choctaw Journey. The name of the permanent exhibition, so this is the name of the permanent exhibition as well. There's 4 exhibits within this exhibition. But both the permanent and changing exhibits highlight Choctaw history, culture, and lifeways throughout stories of past cultural awakenings, of the past cultural awakening. This is all scripted, so my apologies. I want to make sure I represent the Cultural Center well since I don't work for it. So bear with me. We'll get to the good stuff here in a little bit. Okay, so through the stories of the past, cultural awakenings of the present, and paths into the future, the Choctaw Cultural Center is a spiritual experience open to anyone who wants to learn the Choctaw tenets of faith, family, and culture. So that's the beautiful Cultural Center that I get to drive up to every morning. The Choctaw Cultural Center encompasses just over 100,000 square feet and houses 2 exhibit galleries, a children's learning area, 7 classrooms, a collection storage area, a 200-seat theater, a gift shop, and a cafe. The Cultural Center exterior has a stickball field where we have tournaments throughout the year. It has a living village, and it has a traditional earthwork mound with a walking trail, which I'll show you that here after a little while. So here's the entrance to the Cultural Center. For those of you where it looks familiar from back in the 90s, as you're driving in every morning, I go, da-na-na-na-na. Oh, such a nerd. So, the permanent exhibits were designed to be experiential rather than text-focused. So when our tribal members came, instead of just reading and learning, we wanted them to really experience the Cultural Center. So as you keep coming back, there's all these nuanced things. As a non-tribal member, you may miss them. But as a tribal member, you'll look up and see something, and you may not know exactly what it is or the reasoning behind it, but it makes you feel more comfortable because it's a part of you. It's a part of the culture that you were raised in. It's a part of, your family events and family gatherings. And it's about the culture that you see on a daily basis. So when you see these things, it looks normal to you, but it helps you feel more comfortable there, which is exactly what we wanted to do. This is a facility for our tribal members, by our tribal members. So the visitors are immersed in 4 different landscapes that tell over 14,000 years of our story in our own words. Within these landscapes, we have life casts, and all of these life casts are of our community members. So it's really cool because you can go in and you can look through and you'll be like, I recognize that person. I know that person. That person's creepy. So, so it's really cool the way that they did these life casts. And basically they came, there's a company that came from New York, and they did the faces, the hands, and the feet of all these different tribal members. And then they gave them abs, and then made these life casts. There's a funny story, and Sue, you might know this, you might not, but in the second exhibit, we have a medicine person on top of a mound. Well, the life cast got his feet mixed up with this little girl. So he's got these itty-bitty little feet on top of this mound, but you can't tell because he's up top and you can't see it. And then you got this little girl with these big, huge feet. So, because he wore men's moccasins and she wore women's moccasins, we had to make some last-minute adjustments. So it's it's good stuff. But all of these figures are wearing and displaying traditional Choctaw clothing and objects that were made by over 40 Choctaw artists. So every single object that's in the Cultural Center is made by a Choctaw community member. It's made by our own people. Many of these objects are things that Choctaw people have not made in more than 2 centuries. So all of the textile garments that we have, we had a young woman that worked for our department, and she had an interest in textiles, and she has been successfully revitalizing Choctaw textiles over the last few years. And she's just done an amazing job. And what's really cool is, they made these textiles and they put them in last minute. Well, now the Cultural Center wants to do some updates because the longer they're there, the more they're going to deteriorate, so you need to switch them out. But they're having an issue because the artists that made these textiles cannot do them to the same quality because they've gotten better. And so if we want to, if someone that knows textiles comes in and looks at these, they're going to see it's an amateur textile. It's an amateur that made this. So we really want to show off the artwork of our tribal members. So it's a good problem to have, definitely so. But it's just amazing to watch all of this cultural revitalization that our community has been involved in. So beyond the exhibits, guests can participate in various classrooms, lessons, lectures, programs, and demonstrations. Programs cover different aspects of Choctaw history, song, dance, art, and ecology. The Choctaw Cultural Center also features Chompali, which is the cafe. In Choctaw, Chompali means good or delicious, which it is. Now, mind you, I am biased because I work there. But if I'm willing to spend my money a couple times a week at this cafe, it's good. And, our elders don't complain much when they eat it. So that's telling you it's pretty good. And, our chefs and our cooks, a lot of them are from the community. So they do a really good job. Definitely recommend it. We also have the Hashi gift store. Hashi is the word for sun and moon in Choctaw. And we have a theater. It can accommodate over 200 guests, and we show different indigenous films and features and artwork and that sort of thing. So it's a pretty great place. Again, biased. The Choctaw Living Village honors the Choctaw earthwork and mound traditions. The monumental earthwork features prominently illustrated and sophisticated ancient architectural relationship between Choctaw people and Mother Earth. Guests can walk near or around the mound as they explore the different dwellings and interact with the educators that work outside. So this is standing on top of the Cultural Center. What you see here is this is coming straight out the back after the exhibits. We have a dance circle right in front. To the right are our Choctaw winter houses. To the north of that, we have a small demonstration stickball field. And of course, we have the mound that we have there. And this mound is created at 1.5 times the size of our mother mound, Naniwaya. Now, what's really fascinating about this mound is this is the best thing that we can do with modern equipment. You see how small the surface area is on top of that mound? Modern equipment cannot get the slopes that our ancestors used to do back in the day. This mound is not going to last as long as the mounds of our ancestors built too. They had a very complex soil engineering of different soils and different clays that held these mounds together. This is not done so. It is way too expensive to build something like that in the modern era. So that really shows how much work and knowledge that our ancestors had. And that's why I'm so excited to brag about this mound, because we are continuing this tradition as mound builders, but we also recognize that our ancestors were a lot smarter than we are today. So entertainment and education are key components in the Loxi Activity Center, which is a turtle, which features children-sized Choctaw dwellings and an immersive mini forest. So Sue had a story, and I don't remember it exactly, so I'm going to try to fumble my way through it, and she'll correct me later. But she had a dream way back when she was, first kind of pulling these thoughts together on what a cultural center would look like. And in this dream was this giant turtle. So when the cultural center was created, that was part of the design, is this giant turtle. And what's really cool about this giant snapping turtle that we have in the children's area, the kids love it. They love to walk up, they love to look at it. But if you go around the side, it's a storytelling room on the inside. So when you go in, it's acoustically tuned perfectly. So if an elder goes in to tell a story, you can hear them from a whisper all the way up to a yell. And what's also fascinating about it is you can see the bone structure of the turtle on the inside. So it's just a really cool, it's great because if you can't find me on Mondays when the cultural center's closed, that's probably where I'm at. Hanging out in there talking to myself. We also have a changing exhibit gallery that's designed for in-house exhibits, traveling exhibits, and loaned objects and cultural events. And then we have classrooms that offer community and visitors a chance to learn in greater detail. So the classrooms are really cool. You know, what we learned over the years is you can go in and say, okay, we're going to teach traditional Choctaw pottery. And you go in and you set up this class and you get 30, 45 people that show up and you put everything into it. You go through the history of it, you go through all the traditions of it, and you go in depth. And here after a few weeks, you got like 5 to 6 people left. What we've learned is that people just want to taste. They just want a little bit of knowledge in that. So that's what the Cultural Center does, is it gives them that taste and that quick engagement that they need. And if they want to know more, that's when the Cultural Center works with our department or our cultural outreach program to then help them in exploring that knowledge even more. And it's just, it's a much better model, and I really enjoy it. You know, one of the lead educators came up and said, well, we want to do this, this hide tanning kind of class. And we're like, you want to do what in an hour? And, but that's what, you know, they just introduced the subject of hide tanning, went through the process a little bit just so people could get a taste. And now we've had 2 or 3 people that have come back and say, I want to tan a deer hide. And so those are people that now we can set up these, you know, 3-day classes for and do these workshops with them. So it really is a great way to work with them. And of course, an important element of the Cultural Center is our collections and our archives. This state-of-the-art space serves as a repository for Choctaw artifacts and archival items. This is the first of its kind for the Choctaw Nation. We've never had an archive before. So now this is a safe place that we can take care of these items that belong to our people. But then, besides just taking care of it, we can then use them to educate our people too. So it's an amazing, amazing place. The collections area will provide Choctaw historical objects a safe place for rehousing, long-term loan, scholarly study, and exhibition display. Of course, I got to put a plug in for the powwow. It's coming up. If you've never been to a powwow, this is one to attend. The Choctaw Powwow is one of the nation's largest, with participation from more than 50 different tribes. This annual 3-day event features delicious food, tribal singing, dancing, indigenous arts and craft. We also host a stickball tournament at the Cultural Center while it's going on. So I'm not a powwow person. I don't go to powwow. I don't know a lot about powwow, you know, because I stay on more of our traditional side of doing things. But powwow has a place in celebrating what it means to be Native American. And it's a way that many different people from many different cultures can come and interact with each other. So it is a wonderful thing. And so I highly recommend that if any of you want to come down and see it, right down there, the code to get some discounts on the hotel. Powwow 23. Okay, so let's get into some exciting stuff, as I'm about to throw this cheat sheet out. Okay. So what I want to do is look at Landscape 3. So within our permanent exhibitions, we have 4 landscapes. 4 landscapes. So the first one talks about our creation and talks about our relationship with Moundville. Our second landscape talks about the town of Shomotokali, or Hanging Moss, which is a really fascinating Choctaw village that was fully excavated so Mississippi Power could put in their power plant there. And then Landscape 4 talks about Choctaw people in Oklahoma. But Landscape 3 is probably the most special to me out of all of them. It's an amazing feeling to know that all the hard work and dedication to researching and documenting our Choctaw treaties and our Trail of Tears routes is being used in a positive way to help our community. I am honored for the role that we've all played in creating this exhibit, and I truly am. It's, all these years of having this information, and I'll have tribal members that reach out and want to learn more about this, and I'll send it, but it's only reaching a very small amount of people. By putting it in this exhibit, this is a way that it now becomes common knowledge to our tribal members, and they have a better understanding of our treaties, but also our removal, which, as you can tell, they're not learning in the school education system, especially in Oklahoma. Yeah. So this exhibit begins with a theater movie that gives an overview of the unraveling relationship between the Choctaw Nation and the United States. It then moves into the removal treaties that ended up forcing us from our homelands to here in Oklahoma. But from the theater, you can go into the treaties hallway, which is what you're looking at here. So this hallway was specifically designed. I might talk about that later. I'm going to hold off on that. Got a whole plan here. Don't want to get ahead of myself. But anyway. Oh, no, it's right here. It's right here. So the way that this hallway is set up is as you enter the hallway, it funnels you. So as you see, you're getting more and more constricted as you go through. That's done purposefully. The exhibit is completely silent except for this haunting, howling wind that comes through. It's specifically set up to set the mood and the tone for our relationship with the United States at this time period. So this area highlights, it doesn't go through all the treaties because that's a lot, and I don't want to put that upon anyone. But it highlights the most important treaties from 1786 with the Treaty of Hopewell all the way to the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek in 1830. After you get through this hallway, it then goes into our Trail of Tears exhibit. The first thing that you see, which I'll show you a picture of here after a little while, is a map of all the different routes that our people went on the Trail of Tears. And then after that, on your right, it has two different removal stories. So one story is from an 1833 removal that is from the James Culberson manuscript. And that, with the descendant family from James Culberson, helped us put together this story that really goes into detail about this removal in a timeline sort of fashion. Below it is the 1902 removal that was done by land speculators trying to cheat Choctaws out of their allotment land. So this is one, I'll talk about it here in a little bit, but this is a removal that was done by train in 1902. On the left side, we have three different theaters. Each theater has a short video of different removal stories from different families. So these are stories between our Choctaw historians and the family members that still have this oral tradition of their removal. And it documents this tradition in these three different movies. Each one of them have their own feeling. That all just comes from that individual tribal member that's telling the story. But they're very powerful movies, and I can't watch them all the time because then I'll tear up before I get to the end. But anyway. So there's a lot more. Oh, and at the very end, there's a display case that's got some cool stuff, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I want you guys to come visit. I want you guys to come go through the Cultural Center and see these exhibits for yourself. So what I'm going to do instead now is I'm going to talk about all the research and the community engagement that went behind in creating these exhibits. So for years we've been working with our community. They call our department and tell us their stories about Trail of Tears. They tell us stories about their family members. And so we kept track of these things. And when it came to planning the Cultural Center, we reached back out to these families and let them tell their story. And that's powerful. When you give people their voice back, it helps them work through the trauma that's been intergenerationally passed to them. And it's a great way to explain to others that maybe don't have those stories anymore. It gives them a sense of feeling of, what their family members may have gone through as well. But all of that goes back to, in 2012, we created our Cultural GIS program in our Historic Preservation Department. And one of the first tasks that we were assigned is we need to map our treaties. And by mapping our treaties, we can have a better understanding or better evidence for protecting our Choctaw cultural and historic sites. But also this plays a role in helping us repatriate our ancestors and aid in educating our Choctaw community. So this was one of our first projects. Now this isn't the first map. This is a quick one I threw together during COVID. Not particularly happy with it, but I'll come back and adjust it. But it goes through each of the Choctaw treaties. But one aspect of this is down here at the bottom. This is not one that anyone's seen before. This is the Treaty of 1765, the Treaty of Mobile in 1765 between the Choctaw Nation and Great Britain. In this treaty, we agreed with Great Britain that we would share that land with England. And in the treaty, England put that we ceded it. It was the first land cession we ever had with a Christian nation. And that's what was done. Now, did they particularly get to use this land? No, because we pretty much torched and burned everything that they tried to do with it because they were trespassing. But over time, we lost control of it with colonization and European imperialism. We did end up losing control of that land and got pushed a little bit farther north. But I always wondered, I was like, why do the Choctaw treaties only go to this one meridian? I was like, what, clearly we would have had a connection with the coast. But it took us a while to kind of figure that out. So, there's other kind of mapping initiatives that are out there that are tracking these different treaties with different tribes. But this is one that's not on any of them. And part of it is because, I don't want to get a hold of myself. Okay, now I can. So, because the Treaty of Mobile was never officially surveyed, we had to use historic maps and treaty text to decipher the boundaries. So there was a specific map that was made for the King of England to show him his new land acquisition a couple years later after the treaty. But also, if you look at the actual treaty text for the boundaries, it's got a lot of place names that aren't called those names anymore. So we really had to sit down and look at the way that these place names have changed through time. And then from that, we were able to draw the boundary of this treaty. Pretty close. I definitely argue. If anyone can do better research on this than us, then please do. We would love to see it. I don't mean that as sarcastically as it sounds. Like, if we can make improvements to it, I would. But here's something that's really cool. So we've never seen the Treaty of Mobile ever before, and we didn't even know where to get it. So we find out that, of course, it's in England, or it's in Great Britain, but we don't have access to it. So we're talking, to some of our tribal members, and, one tribal member pulls me aside and he's like, I could get you access to that. And I went, I'm sure you can, if, please, please. So this guy, his name is D.G. Smalling. If any of you have seen his artwork before, he does one-line drawing artwork. So D.G. reached out to one of his friends in the House of Lords, and they transferred the treaty to the House of Lords so he could specifically go and look at it. And after he looked at it, he got the House of Lords to make copies of it for us, digital copies, which we used in the exhibit. We think a lot of times as our tribal members and, as natives really, as, they're in Oklahoma or they're here and they're there, but we are a worldly people. We are an international people, just like every other person on this planet is. And so we can't limit our thinking. We have to always stay open-minded about these things. And so, Yeah, it's just pretty cool. So then we took those images and we used them here in the exhibit. So all of our tribal members can now see this treaty. Patricia Galloway did a really good article on this treaty. If you guys are interested in it, I think it's called like Many Little Republics. It's a really great article. I did a story map off of that. I went day by day following what was happening with all the Choctaw chiefs. It's really fascinating, the politics. Anyway, so moving on from that. In 2012, we also did another initiative. Besides just mapping our treaties, we started mapping our Trail of Tears routes. At this point, we were consulting in most of Arkansas, which was crippling us because Arkansas is building a lot of things a lot of times. They're getting money from somewhere, I'm not sure where, but they're doing lots of stuff and lots of things. I pick on Arkansas. I was raised in Arkansas, so we started working on the Choctaw Trail of Tears route. Initially, we reached out to the Arkansas Archaeological Survey, and they helped give us some digital topos. And so we took those topos and we georeferenced them onto this map, and then we drew these corridors and digitized it so that we could serve it out to our different federal agencies so we could consult on these areas and help protect any of our tribal members that were buried alongside the road. Well, after a few years, then we started working with the Arkansas chapter and the Sequoia National Research Center, and we started making a lot of changes and updates to this route. So it's really interesting. If you look at this map, I found older copies of it, and you can see how these different routes move and how more routes are added, each kind of iteration of the map. But this is the one that we have in the Cultural Center exhibits. So like I said, we're doing continued research. One of the last things we did is we added the 1902 land speculator removal, and we added the 1903 federal removal onto this map. So you can see coming from Choctaw homeland straight across this orange line over to Dallas, that's the train route that was used, the Queen and Crescent and the Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railroad. So from this, we said, okay, this is a really great map, but it's really confusing. Like, from a researcher standpoint, this is great. Like, I look at this and I get it. It's because we made the map. But it's really hard to comprehend. So what we did is we worked with our Choctaw Nation Capitol Museum and our Wheelock Academy Historic Site Museum, and we developed, we changed this map into an exhibit for them on Trail of Tears. So it's an interactive exhibit. It's cool because you can press different buttons and it will light up that particular route, and it has a story that goes along with that route. It's a really cool exhibit. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. But that's what led us into, it took all of this research to be able to put this into both our treaties and our Trail of Tears exhibit in the Cultural Center. So it took all these different years of putting all this information together. But it's not just putting it together, but it's looking at it from our perspective. You know, we have all of these books and all of these articles and all of these things that are written by people that aren't our own, telling us about our people. And some things they get right, but a lot of things they get wrong. So what we can do is we can take this information, we can piece it all together, and then we can look at it through our own Choctaw perspective. And then that way we get those different alternating perspectives on what's really going on. So I really want to give a shout out to both Carolyn Kent and Dr. Littlefield. This Trail of Tears exhibit wouldn't be as good as it is without them. So I really do want to give a shout out to both of y'all, and I really thank you. And don't worry, you're not off the hook. We're still doing more changes. So in our department, we had an archaeologist that started working for us. And she was an intern. She did some really great work, and then she decided she had an opportunity to go to law school. So she left our department and went to law school for about 6 to 8 months. and she realized she didn't have the personality for law. She didn't want to become the person that she was having to become to do lawyer's work. So she came back. And luckily, we had a position that was open for her. So she's a landscape archaeologist by trade. And so she does a lot of research in our department. And she helped us, early on. She's still here today. She's now our NAGPRA coordinator. But she wanted to look more into, she was talking with a tribal member one day. And for Choctaws, if you look at our CDIB card, it'll say Choctaw. But some of them will say Mississippi Choctaw. And a lot of people didn't really know what that meant. And I was talking to an elder one day, and he goes, yeah, I remember reading this article in the 70s, and it explained that people that have Mississippi Choctaw came over in the 1902 and 1903 removals. And I went, oh. So I was proceeding to tell her about that when she first started working for us because, she wanted to know what that meant. And I said, but, I don't have a lot more information beyond that. We'll have to work with someone to do research at some point. Well, she took it upon herself, and she tracked it down, and she found out her family was one of the ones that was brought over in the 1902 removal, which was done by land speculators. And I'll go ahead and read this, but basically she took all of her research that she did over all these years, and we worked with a Choctaw filmmaker, Mark Williams, and we developed this 30-minute documentary that goes over the 1902 and 1903 removals by train. It's on YouTube. It's called Ikayana Lachi, which means I will remember. But in 2021, we worked with the Choctaw filmmaker Mark Williams to create a documentary that told the story of the 1902 and 1903 removals. This film tells the story of a land speculator that herded Choctaw families onto boxcars, like cattle, stored them in a warehouse with no heat, meager food, and little supplies. The land speculator successfully sold a few of these Choctaws as slaves to local farmers. This is 1903 that we're talking about. The local Indian agent caught wind of this scheme, and he was able to free the families, but also make sure the families still had their allotment lands, which this man was trying to steal from them. We have a list of these families. And that's because a few years later, this man went to the Supreme Court and tried to sue all of these families for money for removing them out there. Of course, that didn't work out. So while this history is dark, we took a positive approach to telling this story. And what's really cool about it is we got to go out to Ardmore and to all these little communities around there and talk to these families. And these families all had these bits and pieces, and they had these stories, and they always knew they came on the Trail of Tears, but they always knew that their Trail of Tears was different than the one that was always talked about. But they didn't really understand how to talk about that. Because when people say, oh, I came over on the Trail of Tears, my grandma came over on Trail of Tears. And you're like, your grandma? Okay. But it's true for these people. Their grandmothers and their great-grandmothers came over in this removal. And so empowering them, letting them tell their story, and then sharing that with the world, it's a very powerful project. And in the show, at the time with the maps that we had, there was the building that was called the Love Building in Ardmore that we thought 3 of the walls were still standing. It ends up not being the building. We found some more records later that showed the building did burn in the fire, which may be a good thing. But yeah, I highly recommend you guys watch this movie. It's really, really great. So lastly, what I want to talk about is the very end of the Trail of Tears exhibit. One of the most remarkable objects located in this exhibit is the Pipe of Peace. This limestone effigy pipe is dated between 900 to 1600 AD. So it's a Mississippian time period pipe. It was used by Chief Greenwood LaFleur during the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek. It was used in the negotiations with the United States. So imagine, this is something that's been around for hundreds of years. It passed down from generation to generation to generations of all these chiefs. From when we were living in these super cities, before European diseases came through and wiped out 90% of our people, this pipe existed. I think there's a rat trying to get out. No, it's fine, yeah. So, sounds like home. So, it's the cats chasing the rats. So anyway, this pipe has been used and passed down all these generations. It was brought over on the Trail of Tears, and then a gentleman named Thomas LaFleur ended up donating it to the Gilcrease Museum in 1958. So I've got to see this pipe a couple times, and if any of you know about the Choctaw removal, any of you know about Chief Greenwood LaFleur, you know, there's some things and some stuff. People have different opinions about him, most of them bad. I think sellout is the word that I hear a lot. So I remember, Gilcrease will hate me for this. So I remember we're in the Gilcrease and we're looking at it. It's the first time I was seeing it, and I was like, man, that is a really cool pipe. And then, you know, they were telling us the history of it, and I was like, oh, so Greenwood LaFleur used it? And I was like, okay, well, let's smash it. Oh my gosh. That curator, I think, almost had a heart attack. Of course, me with my sense of humor, she didn't know I was joking. And so there was always her in between me and that pipe for the rest of the time. I noticed that. So I kept a good distance, tried to get her to relax. Well, anyway, upon opening the Cultural Center, we got the pipe on loan. And the Gilcrease gave it to us on loan to be able to be a part of our exhibit. And so that was really, really great to have it. After I learned more of the history, I was like, oh, yeah, we should not smash that. That's actually a really cool thing. In 2021, Choctaw Nation submitted a NAGPRA request for the Pipe of Peace from the Gilcrease Museum. In 2022, they repatriated it back to the Choctaw Nation. So this pipe is now in full ownership of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma and is now on permanent display in the Cultural Center, which is just absolutely amazing. The Gilcrease Museum has been wonderful to work with. They've been really awesome. They also have a copy of the 1792 treaty with the Spanish. That this is probably our copy, so it's probably the Choctaw copy that they have. So it's really cool to see that treaty. It's the first treaty I've ever seen in person. Got to touch. It's pretty neat. A little scary. Oh, that's bright. So, future for the exhibit. Oh, I got 1 minute. So, over the next few years, we plan on continuing to do research on both our treaties and our removal routes so that we can get ready during the panel's next update cycle to make changes to the exhibit. So, meanwhile, between that time, we have a few things that we want to work on. So I'm going to go through this very brief list. Firstly, we want to create more story maps on Choctaw treaties, removal routes, and removal stories. So that we can engage with our tribal members. With COVID, we've seen a huge increase in not just our elders, mostly our elders that are now using cell phones and a lot of mobile technology. So now it's a great way that mobile can be used to really reach out to our tribal members, young and elderly. So we want to do more of these Esri story maps, which I'm a fan of. I've done a couple this year, and they're amazing. They're easy to do. I'm really excited to do more. We want to do more research on our French and Spanish land cessions. Most of the French land cessions, they weren't really land cessions. They were like, yeah, you can build a trading post there. The Spanish, we did a few land cessions, mostly for forts. But it'd be interesting to learn more about those and understand the give and the take that we had with these nations. We're working with our partners at the Musée du Quai Branly in Paris. They're going to try to get us in touch. They're trying to find where these treaties are stored at and get us in touch so that we can view these treaties in person, which are old treaties from the 1700s. I'm planning on working with the Arkansas chapter and the Sequoia National Research Center on our 1840s and 1850s removal routes. So I noticed over here, if I had a Sharpie, I would have made edits to your panel. But the Choctaw removal, there were 7,000 Choctaws that were removed in the 1840s and 1850s in Arkansas. As far as I know, up the Arkansas River to Fort Smith. So if you have 15,000 that were moved in the 1830s and then another 7,000 removed in the next 2 decades, that's an important history that we don't know a lot about. And so we want to learn more about that. I also want to work with Carolyn a little bit more. She's agreed to help me in kind of locating our mustering points that we had in Mississippi. So, from an Arkansas standpoint, Memphis, Vicksburg, Helena, Lake Providence, Point whatever, Chicot, I don't know how you say it. I'll get corrected later. But it's great, all of our maps show these are these origins, but, Choctaw people were mustering, and they had a whole story before even reaching the Mississippi River of disease and bad weather. And so we need to do a better job at telling that story of what our people went through before even leaving their homeland. The Forest Service has reached out both in Louisiana and Mississippi, and they want to help us make some improvements to our removal routes in both of those states using old GLOs and also LIDAR. So I'm pretty excited to work with them in the future on that. I want to work more closely with the Alabama chapter and the Oklahoma chapters to really nail down the removal routes within Oklahoma and Alabama. So in Alabama, we had Choctaw people that went to Mobile. And in Oklahoma, we had people that came in Fort Smith, but then they went all the way down to the Red River within Oklahoma. So I'm having a hard time tracking down the Fort Smith, Fort Towson military. So I'd really like some help with that. I'd like to work with someone on getting the rail beds for the Queen and Crescent and the MKT Railroad that went from Meridian all the way to Dallas and then up to Ardmore and Toka. Most of those railroad beds are the same ones that were used, but there's a few areas where they have changed. And so I want to make sure that we're tracking those rail beds for you. Of course, continuing to do research on different Trail of Tears stories, poems, songs, supporting our bike riders and other community events that are coming on. We used to have a Trail of Tears runner group that did a relay. And they did that for 3 years, and it was really, really cool. They were called Tushko Lili, which means running warrior. Continuing to aid our Choctaw artists in writing books and doing films. We're currently working on supplemental curriculum in Oklahoma. And so, we're including Trail of Tears, history into that, since we're not really teaching that anymore. And finding time to sleep. That's also But anyway, I thank you all. I appreciate it, and we couldn't do this without you all. So thank you all for all that you do and all that you will continue to do. God bless.